Whoa, buddy, put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, yeah. Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the big radio program. It is Tuesday, which means it is our weekly deep dive edition where we get down into the weeds with our friend Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Three big topics that are important, a little bit different today. We've got some new things that he wants to talk about and a memoriam as well. And we got a lot of things to talk about. In hour two, I'm going to do a brief recap at the top of the hour to go back down through some of the things that I wanted to comment on with that Brad's going to cover. And then in our second segment, we'll be taking Chris Story a little bit early, but he'll be wearing his realtor hat. There's a new ordinance in Anchorage that would criminalize some behavior of landlords. It would force landlords to pay for tenants to move out. And if they fail to do so, it could criminalize them. And so I wanted to get his take as a realtor and as a supporter and an idealist who wants people to be able to get into their own properties, especially properties that they can then leverage to rent or, to become a landlord and become their own backyard millionaires. So we're going to talk about that with Brad or with Chris in hour two this morning. That'll be the first part of the hour. And then in the second final segment of the hour, we'll get him to put his positivity guru hat on to help us out there at the end. So that's going to be all good stuff. All right. So what do we got? We got some good stuff with Brad, the weekly top three. And I think we should just dive down into it and get and get things ready to rock and roll. Without further ado, let's make this all happen and get Brad Keithley on from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. He joins us right now. Good morning, my friend. How's life for you? What's
Michael,
happening, sir?
Life's great. We sort of coordinated today, dark tops. So
I see that. I see that. I got the
right.
memo.
I felt the wave.
I got the memo, and we're all good. Logo wear, black logo wear is where we can go. It's good. And hopefully everybody else got the memo as well. So we're all going to dress the same from here on in. Let's dive down into it, because you got a lot of stuff to unpack with us today, Brad. Today we're going to start things off with what you're calling the big self-inflicted wound. And this has to do with a piece that is reporting on Speaker Bryce Edgman, who he's warning that, boy, things are just so tough, and it's so, and of course, never acknowledging the fact that it was the actions of the legislature that has contributed to where we're at right now. So give me the rundown here.
So there's an article in Alaska Public Media this past week, the headline of which is House Speaker Edgman warns of deepening strains in Alaska coastal communities. And it reports on remarks that Bryce gave during a conference focused on Alaska coastal communities, and his discussion of, or his talk about how times are worsening, economic times are worsening out in those communities, that prices are rising, airfares are rising, fish revenues are falling, and it's just having this tightening vice on the coastal communities. And I sat there reading this article, and I just kept going, okay. All this stuff is bad. They need more revenue. They need more personal revenue out in the coastal communities. But who's been taking that revenue away? Who's been diverting a big chunk of money that comes into the coastal communities away? Oh, it's been the legislature and Bryce. So as I read through this and started to, understand the points he was making and understand the problems he was addressing, it started to dawn on me that some of this, at least, is a self-inflicted wound by the legislature, by the region's own legislative delegation to take money away. I posted this and made that comment on one of our outlets, the Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets group page, Facebook group page, and Willie Keppel, a listener, made the comment, yeah, he's diverted $100 million out of at least just Lyman Hoffman Senate District, the two halves that are Bryce's state Senate or state representative district and Nellie Jimmy's state district, that he's diverted $100 million out of that district through PFD cuts. It wouldn't be that much. It'd be you'd have to. I mean, if you don't use the PFD cuts to fund government, you have to do something to fund government. A portion of it would come from increased oil revenues. A portion would come from better permanent fund returns, and thus a bigger POMV draw. But a portion of it would have to come from Alaskans, and just like it's coming now from Alaskans through PFD cuts, a portion of it would have to come in another fashion from Alaskans, which would reduce the $100 million a little bit. But it's a huge chunk of money that's being taken out of those communities by Bryce himself, Bryce and Lyman themselves, through using PFD cuts as opposed to other revenue measures that could be used to raise the money. The thing that really got me was the last paragraph of this article. It says the legislature has limited power for many of these challenges, which fall to federal policy and private industry. Still, Edgman says the state can play a role, from boosting school budgets to pushing for stronger seafood marketing and supporting rural transportation networks. Here, his solution, and this is a fundamental problem, not only with Bryce and Lyman, but the legislature itself. They think the solution is tied up in spending more state money to effectively try to lower costs substitute state money for costs that are being incurred out in the regions. But what they don't focus on is the revenue side. Very few in the legislature focus on the revenue side of anything, but they don't focus on the revenue side and don't focus on what they're doing on the revenue side. And by funding this additional spending to try to moderate costs, indirectly try to moderate costs out in the region, they're whacking Alaska families in the region in the face by taking revenue out of their pockets, diverting revenue out of their pockets to fund those costs. I wish that Bryce and others would focus on the revenue side and say, what's a better revenue system than the revenue system we're using now that takes money directly from middle and lower income Alaska families, the core of the constituency that he and Lyman and Nellie have out in those districts, out in that region. What's a better revenue system to raise the revenue we say we need, or maybe not raise the revenue at all, maybe just cut spending? But what's a better system, whatever revenue we need, set aside the spending cuts that need to be made, but whatever revenue we need, what's a better revenue system for our region than the revenue system we're using now, which is PFD cuts? I wish they would take the time to think through that. And if they did, they would realize there are much better revenue systems that would help the region. And so instead of talking about all of the problems that are there because the costs are rising, they could help to ameliorate that by helping raise revenue, by using a different revenue system to raise the revenue that would leave more in the pockets of Alaska families in the region. It's a self-defeating, the mechanism that they and others in the legislature have set up is a self-defeating mechanism that is a self-inflicted wound on that region, particularly the rural regions of Alaska. It's a self-inflicted wound on those regions by taking out the revenue source that is most important to those regions, taxing the revenue source that is most important to those regions. And it's just, I mean, it's whenever you see one of these articles or you see one of Bryce's speeches or you see one of the comments, it's just the absence of understanding that really strikes home.
Well, and I think what you're looking at is this is the overall feel for this is a snapshot into the mindset of the legislators. I mean, they're talking about how these areas are struggling and the local economies are burdened and et cetera, et cetera. But the answer is obviously not making sure that the economies in those areas are doing well on their own and not what people could be doing with their own monies or taking care of themselves. This is, like you said, it's all about the government spend. The state can play a role, boosting school budgets, pushing for stronger seafood marketing, doing all. This is all about they know better than you how that money should be spent. Not a word about the hundreds of, tens of millions of dollars that have been taken out of the private economy in terms of the PFD cut. And maybe those people could take care of themselves in some ways by having that money. It is a snapshot into the mindset of we know better than you how to do this, and you should just let us have free reign essentially to go do those things.
Yeah. And they think we know, I mean, we can boost school funding. Well, okay. That helps those who are tied to that helps maybe those who are tied to the school economy, right? In the communities. And that's a segment of the communities.
Right.
But it doesn't put money in the pockets of the entire community. I mean, somebody who's not tied to the school economy, which would be a fairly significant segment of the economy out there, not tied to the school economy, it doesn't help them at all. What you've done is you've taken money out of their pocket, out of the pockets of those families, to put money in the pockets of the fortunate few who are tied to the school economy. It's selective benefits that they're trying to create these constituencies that are thankful to them or dependent on them at the expense of the broad scale families, the middle and lower income Alaska families in those regions that are subsidizing the other segment of the economy out there.
Well,
by losing money or having money diverted out of their pockets to benefit those few.
You see, it's a good start, Brad, because if we do that and take the money out and help those people who are, it's going to entice more people to become part of the government economy. And so therefore, pretty soon, everybody will be dependent on the government economy. And so then they can really, maybe that's not in their mind what the articulated goal, but I think subconsciously that's what they want. They want everybody to be dependent on, the government largesse in one form or another, whether it's through the school industry or the public safety or, education, or, you fill in the blank with whatever public industry is in these areas. And they want it to be this cyclic, money flows in and money flows out because we're all dependent on that's ultimately, I think, what they're looking for.
Yeah, it's sort of also the Reagan trickle down theory, right? If we give money to the schools and people tied to the school economy have money, then it will trickle down to the rest in the region. I mean, that trickle down theory has never really worked. It doesn't work at the federal level with income tax. It doesn't really work at the state level with Bryce and Lyman's state funded economy out there. We're talking about significant amount of money. I mean, we talk about the PFD in terms of the individual PFD, but how we really ought to talk about it is in terms of the household impact. And so that $3,000 cut that Willie talks about, or maybe the $2,500 cut after you take into account the alternative funding that you'd have to come up with, that's $7,500 to a family of three. It's $10,000 to a family of four, cash in their pockets in those regional economies. And that's in those regional economies, that's a lot of cash. That's a lot of impact. Yeah. And you're putting it in every household out there. So it would be useful, I think, if Bryce and others would think about these issues, not only in how can I spend more money to help my region, it's how can I help my region hang on to more money, hang on to more revenue in terms of changing the way in which the state is raising the revenue through using the most regressive tax system ever proposed, according to ICER economist Matt Berman. If you change that, if you use a more broad-based, if you use a more, if you get more from the fair share from the oil industry that we've talked about, if you get more from the POMV draw by getting better earnings with the permanent fund, if you change the revenue side and leave that money in the pockets of Alaska families out in that region, you're going to be a lot better off.
Well, this is the continual, as you said, self-inflicted wound. I mean, you're pointing to this one here. We've pointed to the whole crisis with the permanent fund by moving money out of the ERA. And it's like a continual. We're self-inflicting our own crises to then justify the actions of what we're doing down the road. And that's, I think, again, a habit that we've got going on in this legislature as well. All right, Brad, quick tease on number 2.
Number 2 is we're going to pick up an old Paul Harvey theme for those who remember Paul Harvey on the radio, the rest of the story. And we're going to start a semi-regular series on the rest of the story about what politicians are saying.
The rest of the story. All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. We got more coming up. Don't go anywhere. Back with more right after this.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top 3. Donna wins the internet today. Hashtag Brad explaining socialism, because that's exactly what we've got going on in this. We have the most socialistic constitution in the state of Alaska. We all own it collectively and everything else. And of course, that was something that Hammond talked about. He was trying to do. He was trying to get the the resource monies into the hands of Alaskans. He said it, explained it as one of the most capitalistic things he could do, trying to get people engaged in it. And of course, the legislature seems to be doing everything in its power to reverse that, so that the money all flows to government, and then they control and decide where the money goes. And that's why we're facing some of the challenges that we have today. And it's why we have the same problems today that we had 20 years ago, if not worse, right? If not worse, because now at least the striking at the permanent fund corpus itself is within sight. They can actually see it. They have a plan that's articulated and ready to go. Brad, but your thoughts on that?
Well, I just think we don't stop and sit there and think about both the family revenue side and the cost side, the family cost side. All the legislature seems to be doing is thinking about the cost side and how can we, the legislature, substitute money to bring those costs down. How could we bring airplane tickets down? How the cost of airplane tickets down? How could we bring the cost of housing down? How can we bring, this or that down by spending money? They're not focusing on where that money's coming from. And you're trying to make, this is the analogy that pops into my head. You're trying to make a mountain over here. You're trying to, build up a bunch of dirt and create a mountain of state support, but you're doing it at the expense of digging this hole on the other side that's coming out of the pockets of Alaska families, middle and lower Alaska families, the core of your constituency, any constituency in the state. 80% of the entire state is middle and lower income Alaska families. So you're doing it, you're building up this mountain, and you're going to pay tribute to the mountain and say all the good things I did by building this mountain of state support. But you've done it at the expense of digging this big hole in the.
Don't look at the hole. Don't look at the hole. Look at the mountain.
In the pockets of Alaska families, and it's just. I mean, yes, the people who get to climb the mountain, the people who get to sit on the mountain, the people who are part of the mountain, yes, they benefit. Great, good for them. But if you look at the other side, you've left the other 80% of Alaska families in the hole, dug the hole deeper for them, taken money out of their pockets, made their economic situation worse to build this great, glorious mountain. I'm sure I can do a better analogy, like some sort of temple or some sort of something.
Think about it, Brad. Just think about it. We'll come up with a perfect analogy here. But I mean, I think your point is well made. That's the thing. We're focusing on the one aspect of it. And again, this goes back to, and I think that paragraph at the end of the article, as you point out, summates the whole thing exactly. The state can play a role, says Edgmond. We have limited powers for many of these challenges, although they're the cause of many of these challenges. I mean, through their actions, but we could play a role by boosting school budgets and pushing for stronger seafood marketing and supporting rural transportation, all having to do with government spend. Nothing about, bolstering the private economy and getting that rolling on its own to help so people can help themselves. They need to look to government for every aspect instead of letting them help themselves or helping them to help themselves. It's the teach a man to fish and or giving a man a fish kind of ideology. And they definitely are trying to give a man a fish at every opportunity. That's
and digging the hole deeper and deeper. I mean,
all at the same time. Yep.
Yeah, we've built the mountain to this level, but now we need to go beyond. Now we need to pour more dirt on top of the mountain and build it even bigger.
Yeah,
see, I'll right up here. Build it even bigger, but you're doing it at the expense of digging the hole deeper.
Here we go. Let's do it.
Public enema number one. Oh, wait, sorry. Public enemy number one, which makes more sense. On the other hand, he's a little bit of a pain in the Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we're back. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top three. Brad is starting off a new segment, stealing a little bit from the great Paul Harvey. Brad has got a little bit of his own, the rest of the story. So, Brad, what is the rest of the story? Give me the deal here.
Well, this is sort of a demographic test in a way, because those who will remember Paul Harvey will sort of self-identify their age as they do this. But Paul Harvey was a great radio. For those who don't remember Paul Harvey was a great radio commentator back in the day who had this great delivery approach that really sort of grabbed your attention. And he had a series called The Rest of the Story, where he would, take a news article and discuss the news article, and then say, but here is the rest of the story around that news article. And it was often, it was every time fascinating about what the rest of the story told you. So in a very poor imitation of that, I'm going to start a little series of occasional series of talking about the rest of the story behind some of the statements politicians are making. And this week, it's a couple of new candidates for governor, Adam Crum and Tom Begich, who are running on certain platforms that tell only part of the story, that really have only part of the story behind it. Adam Crum's is one that just. I'm not a big Crum fan, and it's just one that really irritates me. Crum, here's an article, about Adam Crum's announcement for his run for governor from the Frontiersman, and it says Crum recently resigned as commissioner of the Department of Revenue, a position he held after being appointed by Governor Mike Dunleavy, highlighting his accomplishments, including boosting the state's credit rating to the highest it's been in years, while optimizing investments and working on bringing new opportunities to the state. I want to focus on the first one, boosting the state's credit rating to the highest it's been in years. You know why we have a high credit rating? It's because we have deep PFD cuts. All the credit rating agencies are concerned about is, can you pay your bills on time? They don't care about the spending. They don't care about how bad the spending is, how skewed the spending is. They just want to make sure you can pay your bills on time. And if you can pay, if you've got a revenue base, if you've identified a revenue base that enables you to pay your bills on time, then you get a high credit rating. Alaska had a low credit rating or a lower credit rating back in the mid 20-teens and sort of the late 20-teens. This is when Devin Mitchell, who's now the head of the Permanent Fund Corporation, Devin Mitchell was essentially the state treasurer. He was responsible for the state's debt and responsible for making the presentations to Wall Street on the state's financial situation, which was the basis for the credit ratings. The credit ratings were going down because the agencies were looking at the state's spend, and they were looking at the then revenue base and saying, this isn't sustainable. We don't know what you guys are doing out there, but we don't think, you're setting yourself up well to pay your bills. And so our credit rating was going down. Devin, in the Walker administration, as part of the Walker administration, went to Wall Street and said, don't worry about that. We'll just start cutting PFDs. And we'll start using PFD cuts, dollars that otherwise ought to go to the PFDs, to divert those and support spending.
There we go. Sorry about that, Brad. We lost you for a minute there. We had a massive internet spike there. So I'm sorry. Go back to the top of the your comment there, as far as we had a problem with our spending, and that's where Devin Mitchell was when he was in charge.
So Devin Mitchell, who was in charge of the state's debt credit rating or state's debt management at the time, credit rating, went to Wall Street and said, don't worry about not having enough revenues. We'll just start cutting PFDs. And for a period of time, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, the credit rating sort of rocked along because Wall Street said, okay, we hear you, but let's see if the legislature goes along with that. Let's see if they will actually cut PFDs. And if they do, then okay, everything's fine. Yes, you have a revenue source and you're going to be able to pay your bills. Don't worry about it. But there was a lot of skepticism, rightly so, up in New York, about whether the state would do a self-inflicted wound like that going back to the first segment for a moment, if whether the state would do a self-inflicted wound of using PFD cuts to pay bills. Once we established that we would, once Devin convinced them that that's what we were going to do, the Walker administration was going to do it, and once the legislature got on a roll and started doing it, the state's credit rating started to climb. So Adam Crum takes credit for, highlighting his accomplishments, including boosting the state's credit rating to the highest it's been in years. It's not anything Adam Crum did. It's the continuation of what Devin Mitchell started, the Walker administration started when Devin Mitchell was in charge of selling Wall Street on what our bond rating ought to be. It was the continuation of those PFD cuts. And so Adam Crum's, reputation that he's claiming is built on the backs of middle and lower income Alaska families who've had to fund government through PFD cuts instead of using other approaches. That's the rest of the story for Adam Crum.
Well, and before you jump into do you think that is such an amorphous thing to stand behind? I mean, I don't think the average Alaskan gives two craps about whether or not the credit rating of the state is pristine or not, right? It's just such a weird thing to brag about. I saw that in one of his other commentaries. Oh, he, under his tutelage, the blah, 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 and the credit. And I'm like, what average Alaskan cares about the credit rating of the state? We want a fiscal plan. We want to know that there's going to be stability. We want to know that, our economies are going to be bolstered. Who cares about it? To me, it was such a weird thing to highlight. But again, he has so few accomplishments. He's got to hang on to anything that he can put his hat on at this point.
That's the deal. There's nothing else. I mean, Crum hasn't helped contribute to resolving our fiscal situation. He hasn't helped implement the legislature's 2021 fiscal policy working group agenda. He hasn't helped, push forward on. In fact, he's gone in the reverse on oil revenues, and he hasn't helped push forward on modernizing oil revenues. He as a member of the Permanent Fund Board, he hasn't pushed for investment policies that would boost the POMV. He hasn't done anything else. So he's grabbing onto this one thing that really comes out of the Walker administration. He's grabbing onto this one thing as his highlight because that's really all that he's got. And it's just humorous to listen to him talk about it. All right, Tom Begich. Here's the rest of the story on the Tom Begich statement. Tom Begich announced that he's running for governor. In the APRN, in the Alaska Public Media article on Begich's announcement, I didn't see this anyplace else, but APRN picks it up. Said the main reason he's running, he said, is to reverse what he sees as state stagnation. He emphasized the need to boost education funding and to raise state revenues from corporate taxes, trimming oil tax credits and the like. He says $500 million in new state revenues within easy reach. That's just agreeing about those things that make sense. None of those things cost an individual Alaskan anything. So the rest of the story on that is, this is like Elise Galvin when she says, "Oh, I've got a solution. I've got an income tax." When you look at it, it's this very thin layer of raising revenues built on the backs of PFD cuts. So we've got about $1.7 billion, $1.8 billion, depends upon what oil prices are at the time. We're facing about $1.7 billion, $1.8 billion deficit over the next 10 years, average deficit over the next 10 years. Begich's $500 million wouldn't raise even a third of that, wouldn't solve even a third of the problem. Fiscal Policy Working Group says we got to raise some revenues, we got to raise some oil revenues, we've got to do spending cuts, we've got to cap spending, we got to do a lot of things. All Begich is picked up on is we got to raise some revenues. And that $500 million wouldn't even cover a third of the deficit that we're running. What's sitting underneath that? How does he do the rest of that? Continuous PFD cuts. If you're not talking about a full solution to the $1.7 billion, $1.8 billion problem, if you're not talking about a comprehensive solution to that problem, you're only talking about a piece of the solution. The rest of it, what you're saying implicitly is the rest of it's going to be covered by the way we've been covering it through PFD cuts. So the rest of the story on Begich, yes, he's got a fiscal plan. Yes, he's going to raise some revenue, less than a third of the deficits that we're facing. Yes, he's going to raise some revenues. But what the part he's not saying, the rest of the story is it's built on PFD cuts. It's built on continuing the most regressive tax ever proposed.
Right. And it doesn't touch but even a third of the current deficit projected. And that's even before we get into last week's discussion of the IEA and EIA and the the potential for, $2 billion in deficits if you include the supplemental and everything else. I mean, it's going to be significant. It wouldn't even hardly be a drop in the bucket on that. But he's going to talk about that. And that's a valid and interesting point. You know what I found interesting about that article? My kind of rest of the story take on this is that he's basically just a placeholder. He admits it in there. He's basically just a placeholder because the article mentions that Mary Peltola is the last Democrat to win a statewide race, but that she hadn't announced whether she was running for any office. And he said, well, I've always told her, and I'd say this to you, if she were to get in the race, I wouldn't need to be in this race. She'd be in the race, but I'm in the race, and that is the difference. He's basically, I'm just a placeholder. I'm just a placeholder of it, which I thought was interesting as well. On top of all that, I'm just here to warm the seat until Mary decides what she wants to do, which is, some irony there as well. All right, finish up the rest of the story, Brad, before we move on to number 3 here.
Well, no, the rest of that is the rest of the story. The rest of the story is whenever anybody's going to come to you during this campaign cycle, Begich and others saying, I've got a solution to the fiscal problems, and it's X. In Begich's case, it's $500 million of new revenues. I've got a solution to the fiscal problem, and it's X. Keep in mind, the rest of the story is, okay, the whole is $1.7 billion, $1.8 billion, $2 billion, depending upon the oil price of the day. The whole is that. Are they talking about a solution that comprehensively solves the $2 billion problem, $1.7 billion problem? Are they talking about a solution that comprehensively solves that? If they aren't, there's a rest of the story, and the rest of the story is they're really talking about PFD cuts to fill the remainder.
Right, because but even if they took the whole PFD, we still don't have them. I mean, come on, this is getting down to the point of where if you generated 500 million more and took all of the PFD, you still wouldn't have enough at this point because it's only another 600 million on the PFD. You're still only at 1.1 billion. You're still short. I mean, it's about to get real out there. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. Number 3 is dead ahead, and we will be back with more. We'll be back right after this. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free ticket radio.
Listened to by more staffers in Juneau than any other show because their bosses told them to. And after what they just heard, oh man, they're going to be pissed.
You're a bad, bad man.
The Michael Duke Show.
All right, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. Go ahead, Brad.
Michael, could we use this segment? I'll talk about it more next week, but could we use this segment to give a shout out to Mike Cronk?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I know that I saw that article and I was like, wow, that's some interesting stuff right there, that he seems to maybe he's listening. Maybe all of our chatter about this is finally starting to get through because he actually is talking about some of the things that we've been talking about on the show for sure.
So yesterday was the first meeting of the Legislative Task Force,
right?
And the ADN has an article on it. The headline is Alaska Lawmakers Convene an Education Funding Task Force. And
well, don't you want to use the in between segment here to talk about it, or do you want to talk about it in the last segment?
I want to talk about. Well, I don't. I want to take the time on Haycox in the last segment. So,
Okay, go ahead.
what I'm gonna do is have a segment on this next week. One of the top three next week will be on this.
Well, give us the tease, and give us the tease, and use this time to talk about it real quick.
But I want to give him a quick shout out because I think he deserves it. So the ADN article is 80% of it is we need more, we need more, we need more. And all the legislators there saying, oh, we need more funding for this, we need more funding for that, school funding, the task forces on funding, and basically it was just we need more of it. But Cronk at the end of this article is quoted, and I think a great insight. Cronk, a former school teacher, pointed to one looming factor not within the task force's purview: the state fiscal plan. For years, most lawmakers have agreed that the state is not bringing enough revenue to pay for all the services that Alaskans expect, including public schools. Fiscal Plan Working Group convened in 2021, brought together a bipartisan group of lawmakers to discuss specific questions, much like the Education Task Force seeks to do now. But most of the Fiscal Plan recommendations were never adopted. This is a quote from Cronk. We need to create a fiscal plan for this state so we're not doing what we're doing every single year, fighting over which funds do we take from somewhere else to fund something else, said Cronk. If we're talking about funding, that should be our goal as part of this. And I think that's a huge insight. Look, the task force is focusing on one piece of the state's goals, or one piece of the state's problem, the education funding, K through 12 funding. But you can't do that in isolation, because you solve education and you've just created a problem someplace else. You can't do one piece of this without having the overarching plan of how you do fiscal policy, having fiscal policy resolved as a whole, or else you're just, stealing from one to pay another. You're just digging the hole deeper in order to build a bigger mountain. You can't do this in isolation. And Cronk making that point during the task force, I think, is an excellent way of highlighting this issue and getting that issue on the table and keeping that issue on the table. So I hope Senator Cronk continues to do that. I hope Representative Rutledge, who's the other Republican on the task force, picks it up and repeats that, amplifies it. And I hope it starts getting through to the other members of the task force. You can't do this in isolation.
Right, Ruffridge there. Yeah, no, I think that it was refreshing to see, especially in such a short article, they were actually able to fit that, actually put that in there at the end. And I was like, wow, maybe somebody is actually hearing what we've been saying this whole time, or finally coming around to the same conclusion, that you can't just keep doing what you've been doing and expect that there's going to be different results on that, for sure. And again, the fact that we keep looking to these folks whose sole answer seems to be, again, the Edgman thing of, well, we just need to spend more. That'll fix it. The more we spend, the better it'll get. Unfortunately, eventually, once they've taken all of the PFD and once they've taken whatever 500 million that Begich is talking about and done all this other stuff, they're going to come to the same conclusion. And basically say, well, we got to find more money somewhere. We're gonna see those taxes some way, shape, or form, and we best be having a conversation about it before it gets to that point.
Yeah, and you can't. I mean, they're going to come up with whatever they're going to come up. The task force is going to come up with whatever the task force is going to come up with. But it's just going to be about K through 12, and so K through 12 is going to have this status of having a task force about it. And they'll say, oh, we need more funding here and more funding there. We need to change the formula here and change the formula there, crowding out something else along the way. You've got to have the overarching architecture of how you're going to do your fiscal plan, and then fit K through 12 inside that, just as you fit the other pieces inside it, just as you fit infrastructure, just as you fit transportation, just as you fit the other pieces inside it. You've got to have that overall architecture before you do any part of it. So I think Cronk has done a great service by raising that issue. I hope he continues it during the subsequent meetings, and I hope Representative Ruffridge echoes it as they keep on going.
We'll have to see. We'll have to see if there's maybe light in the foxhole. We'll have to see what happens here. Brad Keithley, our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. The weekly top 3 continues. Let's do it. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show, proudly splitting the left versus right dichotomy. Yeah, I had to look that word up too. I don't think it means what he thinks it means. Here he is, though. That guy, Michael Dukes, the one with the show.
Okay, continuing now, Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, weekly top three. Kind of a different change of pace for our top three this week. Now we've got his final thoughts is an important life, a memoriam. Brad, so give us your thoughts here on what's happening here. Give us some insight here.
Well, Steve Haycox, who was a longtime University of Alaska Anchorage professor of history, and someone who I've admired greatly, passed this last week, and I want to note how significant I think Haycox is, and how significant he will continue to be through the books he wrote and through the articles he published. When I came to Alaska, I started digging into Alaska. There were four people really who had written a lot about Alaska, who I really spent a lot of time studying and reading and getting to know in some sense with each of them. Steve Haycox was one, noted Alaska historian. Scott Goldsmith, who we've talked about a lot on the show over the years, former a retired emeritus professor at University of Alaska Anchorage on economics, headed ICER for a while, wrote some great stuff back in the late 2000s and early 2010s on sustainable budgets, really sort of the genesis of the Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets was another one I've read a lot. Jack Roderick, who former mayor of first mayor of the unified Anchorage borough, maybe, but a former mayor of Anchorage at least. But more importantly, a longtime oil and gas lawyer, wrote a book called Crude Dreams, which to me is the best oil and gas book ever written about Alaska. Described the beginning of the Alaska oil age. Jack was there and described the development over the years, and I think has some terrific insights. And then Terrence Cole, who was professor of history, sort of Steve Haycox's counterpart at UAF, University of Alaska Fairbanks, and also Dermot's twin brother, Terrence Cole, historian. I've read a lot of his stuff. But Haycox had a huge influence on how I've come to understand Alaska. He wrote 4 books. The one was called A Warm Past: Travels in Alaska History. Interesting sort of view of various times in Alaska history. The second was Alaska, an American Colony, which really outlines, I think, his view that Alaska was and remains in many respects a colony of America rather than a full-fledged state. Frigid Embrace: Politics, Economics, and Environment in Alaska, which I thought was a great way of understanding the oil industry. And Battleground Alaska: Fighting federal power in in America's last wilderness. Those were the books, and a lot like Scott Goldsmith's stuff on economics, Haycox's stuff on history, I think, really helped me understand the fundamentals of Alaska history and the forces and the dynamics at work in Alaska history, not only historically, but I think we see those same themes coming through today. And so I want to note Steve's passing and talk about it in the sense of just mention this in the sense of not only highlighting Steve as with his passing, but noting that Steve will continue to live on in terms of the things he's written and the things that I think really provide great insights on Alaska. One piece, Steve also wrote a number of essays, a number of opinion pieces in the ADN over the years. He was a semi-regular contributor He and John Havelock were semi-regular contributors to the ADN. And one piece he wrote in 2018 that I've kept sort of, if I kept these things on paper, it'd be yellow sheeted by now. It'd be turning at the edges. But one of the pieces he wrote back in 2018, while we were still in the early PFD wars, he wrote an op-ed piece, and it says Alaska is still an economic colony. The legislature's action on the permanent fund earnings prove it. And basically, it was the theme of the essay was, look, Alaska says it's self-reliant, but it's really not. It turns to the federal government for money to fund its operations. And now that we've gotten down to a point where the state funding is low, rather than raise money broadly, or rather than raise money by going back and looking at the oil industry or looking at our other resource industries, we're starting to take it out of the pockets of of Alaskans, the very people that we're trying to claim are self-reliant. Down toward the end of the column, he says this: the designers of the Alaska Permanent Fund hope to wrest more of the benefit from the exploitation of Alaska's resources for the people of Alaska, and at the same time somewhat mitigate the effects of our economic dependency. As the fund was made part of the Constitution, the corpus cannot be appropriated by the legislature, but the dividend program, drawn annually from the earnings of the fund, is how all Alaskans receive some personal benefit from development of their natural resources. Would it please the designers of the fund that the state legislature has now diverted into state coffers for general appropriation, created a dependency on the state government for their livelihood? Would it please the designers of the fund that the state legislature has now diverted into state coffers for general appropriation a large portion of what used to be the people's direct benefit? No! Exclamation point. Former Governor Jay Hammond said clearly that the fund's earnings should go to the people's hands, not the legislature's. This is at a time when the debate was on about whether we ought to just give up on the PFD and let the state have it or go forward. And that was a key, Steve Haycock's words were a key turning point for me in saying, no, we ought to continue the fight for the PFD. So the man lived a great life, but his words lived on. If you haven't read the books, read them. If you haven't read the essays, read them. He just has a huge amount of insight. He's had a huge amount of insight about the state.
Yeah, and I mean, some of his articles, especially, that one talking specifically about, this is what the framers intended of the Constitution, and then this is what the architects of the Permanent Fund intended, and you could see it right there. I mean, anybody who has any doubt about what's being done and what's been done to the Permanent Fund since Bill Walker understands that people like Hammond would be outraged that this is what's going on, and he makes that point, I think, very well in some of his pieces and some of his articles. And it's like you said, it's kind of sad that we've lost that voice, especially from an academic standpoint of being able to go back and look at history. But the lessons are still there. The lessons are still there to be learned.
They are. And the thing about the PFD that struck me so much, he put it in a historical context. It's, look, Alaskans have been a colony. They've been dependent on somebody like forever. And we've been an American colony. We've been dependent on the federal government. And this was a turning point. I mean, what Haycock saw is this was a turning point in Alaska. Are we going to continue to be dependent on somebody, or are we going to allow self-sufficiency, at least this step towards self-sufficiency, to exist? And his point was, look, now we're turning everybody into dependent on the state. You've talked about dependency a lot. And this is Haycock was putting this in the historical context and saying, look, this is a watershed event that we are now creating another dependency on the state. And instead of allowing Alaskans to be self-reliant and giving them the resources to be self-reliant, we're turning them into another dependency on the state.
Well, rest in peace. Stephen Haycock's brought a lot of good information out there. And again, he's going to live on, and you could find his books out there, I'm sure, and his opinion pieces in the ADN. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. It's going to be a year, Brad. We're a year away from the primary, like today, right? I mean, it's going to be a year between now and then just for the governor's race. I can't imagine what this is going to look like, but you'll be here with us the whole time. So thanks for coming in and joining us. We appreciate it.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
All right, folks, we got more coming up. Hour 2, my thoughts, Chris Story on being a landlord, and then a little bit of positivity in the end. If you've got to go, be kind, love one another, live well. We'll see you later. Otherwise, we'll see you back with more in hour 2. Yeah, I mean, I remember reading that piece from Haycock's where he was specifically talking about that, you know, the no, like the big no, like this is not what they would have wanted. And this is not what they intended. And yet we continue to see these actions from our legislators, and we just go, you guys, you're missing the whole point here. You're missing the whole point. And it's painful. Those that fail to learn the lessons of history are doomed to repeat them. And that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, they grabbed I mean, there's a lot of things you can say about that 2017, 2018, 2019 period. But they grabbed the easy thing. They didn't do the hard work. They didn't dig in and do the hard work that Alaska needed at that point. They could, because sort of like your stockbroker, right? I mean, or sort of like your financial advisor. The funds come through him in a way on their way to you. They're your funds. They are set aside for you. They're held in trust for you as they come through your stockbroker. But they come through his fingers, and the permanent fund dividend comes through the fingers of the legislature. And rather than let that flow through as the statute provided, rather than allow the additional support of self-sufficiency, right, that the fathers envisioned, the legislature just did the easy thing and just took those funds, just diverted those funds into its own pocket.
Yeah, well, I've made the analogy before, I think, to Randy, where I said, you know, it's like a money market a fund, you know, market managers, where they just decide to take all of the dividend that you would have received as a shareholder because their expenses were up. And you'd be like, hey, wait a second. You're taking all of my dividend, all the money that's owed me because your expenses are up. That's a problem. I don't care if you think you're benefiting me or not. I think that's a problem. And I think it's a valid argument that, you know, we should be looking at that and going, well, wait a second. Give us the money. And this goes back to my old analogy of, you know, I think we should get all the money directly. Stop giving it directly to the state, right? Just give it all to us directly. We'll all get a check for $20,000 a piece. And then when they issue that tax bill the next week for $18,500 a piece, there would be a reckoning, right? There would be a reckoning of like, whoa, wait a second. I just got 20 grand and you want 18.5 of it to fund whatever. We need to look at something here. It would come to a screeching halt in this state.
Yeah. The reason Haycock's resonated so much with me on that piece is in a former life, as an oil and gas lawyer down in the lower 48, I had represented family trusts in connection with family trusts that were created to handle oil royalties. And the way they were structured was the oil royalties came into the trust. They were invested. Some of them were flowed through. There were trust instructions on how to flow it through, but the portion that wasn't flowed through was invested. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? And the trust provided that the dollars would go out on a per person basis, equally on a per person basis to all the members of the family. That was the family trust. The PFD is nothing more, or the permanent fund is structured the same as that. It's structured in the same way as the old family trust down in the lower 48. And you would never even think in the lower 48, you would never even think of saying, oh, well, a portion of this goes to the state. portion of this goes to, you know, to someone disproportionately. It's the way the trust was set up. And that's what the permanent fund statute is. It's the trust rules. It's the provisions of the trust that describes how the benefits are to be distributed. It is so analogous to a lower 48 family oil and gas trust, royalty trust. That it's, I mean, to me, it was just, oh, well, that's obvious. Somebody was really thinking through the provisions. And so Haycox comes along and says, look, this is a way we were going to provide self-sufficiency. This is a way we're going to provide for, to get off government, to get off reliance on the government, dependency on the government. It was Hammond's vision and others' vision that this was a step to make Alaskans independent. And here we go. We're an American, we've been a U.S. colony because of dependency on the federal government. Now we're creating another dependency on the state, on state funding, by allowing them to, take these funds and deprive them of, cut them off and withhold them and divert them from the pockets of Alaska families. It was a great insight. That essay was a great insight into the historical significance of that decision.
Ben was just asking if we could link back to Haycox. There's a whole, let me just drop this link in the chat room. There's a whole list of all of Haycox articles, both opinion pieces and everything else on the ADN. You can go back there and take a look at it. I just dropped a link in the chat room for you there, Ben, so you can take a peek at that. All right. Well, it's Randy, you're missing the whole point. Giving a $20,000 check to all citizens would draw hordes of bums and drug abusers to Alaska. You're missing the whole point. If they got a $20,000 check and then had to write an $18,500 check back to the state, how many bums and drug abusers would come here? Right? I mean, that the whole point here is that they're taking all the money and utilizing it how they want to use it. And if it went into the people's hands first, that would change. That's the whole point of what we're talking about with this stealth tax here in Alaska. But anyway, all right, Brad. Well, good stuff. Thank you for coming on board. As always, it's great to talk with you, and we look forward to next. And again, the upcoming election season. I'm kind of, I don't even know. I'm trying to brace myself, Gertrude. That's what I'm trying to do. Try to brace myself for what's coming.
Well, it'll be great. It'll be great stuff for rest of the story segments.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We'll be doing 2 or 3 of those segments a week. Absolutely. All right, Brad. Thanks so much for coming on board. We appreciate it.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
Folks, we got to go. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Let's do it. Here we go.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Oh, yeah. Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Hello, my friends. How you doing? Are you ready to rock and roll? We're into hour 2 of the big radio program. If you just are joining us, first of all, good morning. You could be a member of the 6 o'clock club, which is a semi-official club of the Michael Duke Show, where all you have to do is get up at 6 a.m. and be listening to the show in the 6 a.m. hour. There you go. There you go. That's what we need to do. Come on out and join us every morning. But if you're just joining us now, we finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. He has he brought us the weekly top 3, and there was some good stuff in there that I want to kind of dissect and talk about a little bit. We're going to be joined here in about 15 minutes by Chris Story, who's going to join us for an extra segment. I do have a 6 o'clock club t-shirt, Melissa just said, you got to make a 6 a.m. club. Melissa's behind the times. I have one. Where there's mugs too. There's mugs and t-shirts and mugs and t-shirts. You should go. I've got it. Go to my website. There's links there. You can go buy them for yourself. You could check it out. Anyway, we got Chris Story coming up here in a few minutes. And he's going to do an extra early segment with us. We've got 2 segments with Chris. The first one, he'll be wearing his realtor hat because we're going to talk about the new law that's being proposed in Anchorage, that it's a new proposed ordinance that would force landlords to pay tenants to move out. And if they don't pay, the city will pay and then penalize and potentially even criminalize the landlords for failing to do so. And it's an interesting conundrum. And when I read the article, the first thing I thought about was wanting to talk to Chris, because of course Chris, his whole intent and his whole goal right now is to help create backyard millionaires, which includes people buying property and then utilizing that property to generate income, to rent them out, things to become landlords essentially. And so this is a good take for him. So he's going to cover that here in the first segment, and then he's going to put on his regular positivity guru hat to give us a life coaching lesson at the end of the show today. All right. So, but I want to go back here for just a minute to talk a little bit about what Brad Keithley was talking about in the first segment. Okay. And so especially number 1 and number 2. Number 1 was the self-inflicted wound. And this is a reoccurring theme that we've seen coming from the legislature here in the state of Alaska for many years, where they create a problem through their actions, and then their solution to the problem is even worse, and it just exacerbates it more. Now, he was specifically talking about this article with Bryce Edgmond and Lyman Hoffman, where they were talking about how there's deepening strains on these coastal communities out in the in the islands, in the Bering Sea archipelago, and how this is real challenges, unique challenges to the economies out there. And again, they go on talking about how the times are tough, the economies are stagnant. There's a lot of things going on. He talks specifically about, communities like St. Paul, where they're the real canary in the coal mine. And then they finish things up by basically saying, the state can play a role in fixing this. And the answer to all of these questions is, of course, more government spending. The article in the Alaska Public Media finishes up by saying the legislature has limited power for many of these challenges, which fall to federal policy and private industry. Still, Edgmond says the state can play a role from boosting school budgets to pushing for stronger seafood marketing and supporting rural transportation networks. Now, let's just dissect that for just a second, okay? As Brad points out, if we boost the school budgets, then only a smaller portion of those communities are affected, as far as we're talking about, setting aside that schools are about kids. Let's just say, because we're talking about economic impacts here, all right? Let's just set aside the fact that the school is supposed to be about educating the kids, but let's just look at it as an economic driver. So if you boost the school budgets, you're only affecting a small portion of the population. You're only affecting the portions that have direct ties to the education industry. Okay? You're not affecting, the small mom and pops. You're not affecting the other industries that are outside of that, or the small entrepreneurships, or even some of the larger companies. You're not affecting the private economy as a whole. And that's what makes a community flourish, is what's happening in the private economy. The public economy, the government spend, is supposed to be ancillary and in kind of a support structure for that. It's not supposed to be the base economy. But he says the state can play a role from boosting school budgets. Okay, great. But again, you're only affecting a smaller component of the people. Now, as I made the argument to Brad, and I don't remember if it was during the break or not, so I'll just kind of revisit it here. I think that that's ultimately part of the goal, is that what they're looking to do is create an economy where every aspect of the economy is dependent on that government spend for one way, in one way or another, by making people more dependent in their economics on the government. That will guarantee a future government spend. And then it becomes kind of a self-licking ice cream cone, right? Because the money flows out of the people back into the government, and then the government expends it back to the people. And they kind of think of it as some kind of perfectly closed circular closed system. But of course, that never works out. We've seen how socialism works, and that it never works out that way. But then he wants to talk about pushing for stronger seafood marketing. Look, I've never understood the seafood marketing thing. And again, I work in marketing. Okay. That's part of my daytime gig, is working in marketing to try and advertise for local people and businesses and things like that. But I quite honestly have never understood why the state of Alaska should be responsible for marketing the resources of the state. And I know it's done across the country by various states, but again, I've never understood why those states would spend taxpayer dollars to promote their own resource outside of you've got companies that are benefiting from this resource, right? You've got companies that are out there taking the timber or the mining or the fish or whatever the resource is. Why isn't it on them? Why do we need a handout to those industries to market that product or whatever to a bigger? Again, stronger seafood marketing has an indirect effect on these areas, because maybe it creates a larger demand, maybe it drives up the price a little bit. But why is it the state's responsibility to do that? I've never understood that. Never ever. And it's not like they get a ton of money. It's between, generally speaking, every year, the tourism industry. The thing is, it's not a lot of money until you start adding up all the industries, right? Seafood gets some, tourism gets another. I don't know, probably timber gets another. I don't even know but I know that, for example, the tourism industry gets $5 to $10 million per year to market Alaska to the rest of the world. And my question is, people already know about Alaska. They dream of going to Alaska. Do we really need to spend $5 to $10 million every year to do? It's good money if you can get it. Don't get me wrong. But how does that help us and why wouldn't these industries, again, if the money wasn't coming from the state, would the industry step up? Probably, because they want to market their product. But if the state's going to do it, why would I want to do it? And then his final comment about supporting rural transportation networks. What does that mean? We've got marine highways. Do we now need to have marine airwaves or subsidized air? Some of that's already going on with the bypass mail and some of the other things. Again, the answer always seems to be spending more government money. And then on to number 2, his second segment, which he called the rest of the story, where politicians say something and they just give you a piece of it. Now, I'll set aside the whole Tom Begich thing for just a minute, because to me that was, it's obviously that he is deeply unserious about this for the moment, because he admits in this article that the only reason he's in the race is because Mary Peltola is not in the race. And I don't know if that means he's keeping the seat warm until she makes a decision, or he's just the Democratic placeholder in this regard. But it is, it's kind of, we're going to set that aside for a second. Let's go back to the whole Adam Crum comment. Adam Crumb's comment and the thing that his campaign has been hitting on, one of the reasons why, one of his qualifications to become governor is that he was just in the Department of Revenue. He started out as in Health and Social Services as the commissioner of that, and then he decided to he moved over to the commissioners, and now he's highlighting the fact that he brought Alaska's credit rating up to the highest that it's been in years. When I first heard that, and look, I'm sure Adam's a nice guy. I mean, he's got, his family, it's important. They're Alaskans, everything else. But again, what is the compelling reason why I would want to bring, to put him in the governor's mansion? At this point, I'm not seeing anything super compelling. And the fact that his reasoning for this, one of his positivity points or selling points, is the fact that he brought the credit rating of the state up to the highest that it's been in years. Well, I mean, Brad points out that this really was, a lot of it was the actions of Devin Mitchell that took place a couple, 3 years before Adam actually was in office, and that he's kind of riding the coattails of that. So whether Adam is directly responsible for it or not seems a moot point, but it seems like a weird thing. Does the average Alaskan care in general about what the credit rating of the state is, whether it's high or super high? As long as we're not down in the doldrums in negative credit rate. I mean, it just seems like it. And what it tells me basically is that they are looking for any positive because there's not a lot of record there. Adam Crum does not have a voting record because he's never held a public office. He's always held appointed political offices. And this is a problem with, I think, some of the other candidates as well. We know Treg Taylor's going to get into the race. But what have you done? I mean, outside of some of the weirdness and scandal and this whole grand jury thing and all this other kind of stuff, what have you done? Same thing goes for Nancy Dahlstrom. Very nice lady. And kudos for her for bowing out of the congressional race when she did. But aside from that, can anyone in this room, anyone listening to this radio, name one thing that Nancy has been known for? One thing that she got passed and approved that was important and that you can name right off the top of your head. Now, somebody like Shelley Hughes, you can name a few things, right? Read by 9, the Sunset Committee. There's some things. She's been a stalwart. Okay, she's got some track. Edna DeVries, she's got some track record. She's got some history, and she's got some votes, and she's got even Bernadette Wilson, who's never held public office. Her. She's been fighting in the streets. She's AFP. She's done this. She did the whole Berkowitz and Bernadette thing. I mean, she's got some. There's some history there. But it seems like all these other candidates, there's not a lot going on. And I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of the story on a lot of these other candidates as well. Because do we really need 10 candidates in the primary? God forbid that Peltola or Murkowski themselves jump into this race. It's going to be a hot mess. That's for sure. All right, we got to go. Chris Story about to join us here. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll continue with more here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Back with more right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
I didn't see this while I was talking. I should have been watching the chat room. Donna says, because I'm not aware of how other states do it. Other states spend industry volunteer fees to pay for their marketing. Well, there you go. Again, why are we spending state money to all right. Anyway. Chris Story, the man from Homer, is in the wings. Shall we add him up here and see what he has to say? Let's get to it. Hey Chris, how you doing?
Morning, Michael. The last time I was in Sedona, Arizona was 2023. No, I apologize, 22. And we went into a number of shops. It was so crowded. Sedona had become a sort of a haven for us to get away and really enjoy everything it's got to offer. It's like Homer, Alaska, but with red rocks. It's beautiful and amazing. And it was so crowded. It would take you 45 minutes just to cross a tiny little piece of the town. And a number of businesses told us that they had protested the Chamber of Commerce and said, stop spending money on marketing. Do not market anymore. We have too many people. So marketing a destination place can, it swings both ways. But I think it's important to keep marketing Alaska to the country because I think it keeps tip of line, top of the tongue. I mean, you've got Iceland. We're competing with Europe. Look, I think it's important. I'm okay with some spending.
I've got no problem if a Chamber of Commerce is going to do it, right? Because they're taking money from their members and utilizing a portion of those funds to do that. But we're talking about taking millions of dollars out of the taxpayer pockets and marketing the seafood industry or the tourism industry. Now, there may be some knock-on and trickle-down effects of those things, don't get me wrong, but shouldn't the industries who are directly benefiting, just like the Chamber is basically taxing the businesses through their fees to pay for their marketing, shouldn't the industries who are benefiting directly from that be the ones that are footing the majority of the bill on that?
Yeah, excellent point. Tourism in general, I think, benefits the entire state, but there's also some other fees that are garnered. To Donna's point, for example, the cruise ship head tax fee goes to each port of call. There's a certain percentage that goes to each port of call, and those communities get those revenues to do with as they please. No, excuse me. They have to be used towards tourism. They have to be used towards infrastructure or improving upon your community for tourist benefit. And I think, so maybe somebody could, figure out, hey, wait a minute, maybe some of those dollars could be pumped back into the outbound marketing. But your point's not lost on me. I was watching Silas Luke Jones on America's Got Talent. He was a guest on my show that particular Tuesday, and then his segment aired that night on AGT. And Simon Cowell and Mel B, who is probably your favorite Spice Girl, Michael, I think, both said, oh, Alaska. I want to get to Alaska, which is my dream to get to Alaska. To your point, people already know about it, but it doesn't hurt to keep it tip of the tongue, top of the mind, because there's a lot of destinations out there. So I don't mind some of it, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm not saying that marketing doesn't work. Obviously it does. But my question is, who's paying for it, and is that the responsible thing to do? That's my main question there. Marketing should happen. Yes. But the question is, should the industries who are directly benefiting it be paying for it, or should the taxpayers be paying for it? That's my
and this is what we count on for you, Michael, statewide, to bring up these conversations and get the right people to answer these questions. I appreciate that.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so we're about to dive into this new article from Must Read, which is talking about this new landlord law. And when I read the article, the first thing I thought about was Chris Story, whose mission in life is to help create backyard millionaires. And part of that millionaire plan and millionaire code and the architecture of that includes owning properties to then rent to other people. And you're a landlord. And so I wanted to get your take as a landlord. This is some crazy stuff here. I mean, we're talking about criminalizing landlords if they don't pay to have people move out of their place. Or they have problems with maintenance or deferred maintenance or whatever. So anyway, I wanted to get your full hot take on this. So you ready to go?
Okay, look forward to it. Ready to go. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. We're going to rejoin here in just a hot second. Chris Story, our guest, The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all the YouTube-y stuff. Let's get to it. Here we go.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. Scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Okay, welcome back to the program. Tuesday edition. We got an early edition. We got a twofer with Chris Story today. In hour one, he's going to put on his hat as a backyard millionaire maker and as a realtor. We're going to be talking about this piece in Must Read Alaska, which includes a new proposed ordinance from Anchorage lawmakers that would significantly raise the costs of being a landlord. The measure would require rental property owners to provide tenants with financial relocation assistance equal to twice the tenant's monthly salary plus any deposit and prepaid rent if the building is deemed unsafe and tenants are ordered to vacate. Now, this is a way for them to try and tackle some of the underutilized housing in Anchorage. There's a lot of problem with vacant and properties that are falling behind on repairs and everything. But to me, I look at that and go, if you're falling behind on repairs and now you're forced to pay double the tenant's rent, it just kind of puts you even further behind the eight ball. To add insult to injury, if you as a landlord can't afford it, the city will pay for it and then charge you, put a lien on your property, and potentially even criminalize it. This immediately raised some hackles in the back of my neck, and I was a little concerned about it. So I wanted to get Chris Story's take on this. Chris Story joins us this morning to discuss, author of The Backyard Millionaire, realtor extraordinaire, radio show host, and more. Mr. Story, how are you?
Wonderful, Michael. And I appreciated you bringing that article to my attention. I hadn't seen it yet in Must Read. And so the first thing I did, like we all should do when we get news from whatever source, is I went to the source, went and actually read the ordinance proposal, the amendment to Anchorage's municipal code. Then I went further and called a friend of mine who happens to be a landlord in Anchorage, and he has over 100 properties plus other commercial businesses and commercial rentals, but he has 100 residential rentals. And I said, okay, what do you think about this? And he answered the question in 3 words that I think fit with your mindset exactly. He said, and I'm quoting, government overreach. Or is that 1 word? Is it 2 words? Overreach?
That's 2 words.
It was government overreach. Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, I don't have an editor sitting here with me.
But he said it slowly. He said it slowly, so it sounds like 3 words. I understand.
Slowly. Emphasis on government. So I'm here from the government, here to help. The most frightening words in the English language. So, but here's what's most telling. Okay, so you've illustrated what the ordinance, this amendment to the ordinance, is going to say. If your property becomes uninhabitable and your tenant is forced to move out as a result of its, uninhabitability, and there's a notice to vacate and they must vacate and relocate, you have to pay up to 2 times of the relocation cost and 2 times the rent. I believe that's just once. I don't believe that's ongoing. I believe it's once. And then you have to refund security deposits you're holding and prepaid rents you're holding. Now, I don't mind if there is some jurisdictional determination is that, hey, this building is not habitable, it's not safe, it's about to explode, the boiler's about to explode, this is a fire trap, something's going on here, and you've got to refund their security deposits and prepaid rents. Of course, absolutely. If it's been neglect on your part and you've made it uninhabitable. But the problem is, who's determining that? And so the building department is going to be determining that in Anchorage, their inspectors and so on. And so I don't know, there's room for human error there, and that concerns me. But here's the most telling part of it all, Michael. You know what's exempted? What would cause you not to be responsible for the relocation cost? Just guess. What act might be carved out here?
An act of government? I don't know.
Yeah, eminent domain. You nailed it. Eminent domain. If the government takes the property and makes it uninhabitable by taking it from you in the course of eminent domain, nobody's responsible for relocating you. Too bad, so sad. You're out the door. The government has pushed you out the door. And if government causes this uninhabitability, then this is an exemption. And that's all you need to know, is that government is exempt from the very rules with which they're holding the landlord's feet to the fire. So I talked to my friend a little further about it, and he said, Chris, this is coming as a result of one landlord. In the building department, there is one guy that owns a bunch of properties that are dilapidated. He's not putting anything back into them. And the building department is constantly fighting with this guy. And so regulators within the government in Anchorage are saying, look, we got to do something about this guy. Okay, tell you what. Why don't we do this? Let's create a new ordinance that's going to affect everybody. We're going to blanket the whole Anchorage Bowl with this ill-conceived legislation that's based on California codes, by the way. And we're going to blanket everybody and impact everybody for the sake of one guy. But I think the marketplace takes care of these things.
You mean that one person uses a gun in a bad way and we're going to do something that affects every lawful gun owner in the country? Say it ain't. I'm sorry, property is what I meant to say. Property, right? That's the same. But this is the reaction of government, right? One bad person doing one bad thing. Let's punish everybody.
Further, you're exactly right. And further reading into this, you see they use the word perverse, and it's applied towards landlords that have a perverse incentive to not maintain their own properties, which is counterintuitive to what everybody knows that's in real estate is you must maintain your properties in order to maintain fair market rents coming back to you. So they're automatically calling us perverts in as much as we have this perverse incentive not to maintain our property. That is so counterintuitive, it's so against the grain of everything that anybody that is actually involved in property management understands, except for apparently this one guy in Anchorage who is apparently ruining it for everybody. But they have one good thing that my friend said that Anchorage municipality has done is provide some sort of tax abatement for not punishing landlords for doing some upkeep, because the tax man will come around if you paint your building, if you pave the parking lot, if you put a new roof on, if you do anything of consequence positively towards your properties, the tax man comes a call in. So Anchorage has done something to sort of stymie that perverse incentive, by the way, the tax incentive. They've done something to offer landlords a little bit of credit there. I don't know exactly what that is, but it reminds me that we here on the Kenai Peninsula have the same exact setup. And maybe those of you listening to Fairbanks understand it as well, that you are taxed up to the gills, and every time you do something to improve your property, be it a rental or your own home, it does increase the tax bill. For example, I, for the first time ever, filed an appeal for my property tax on my own personal home in 2024. And when the assessor came out or sent one of their people out to my house, they made a comment to me, oh, we didn't realize you'd paved your driveway, and wow, you have some nice landscaping, and it's a pretty fence you got there. We'll catch you next year. And they did, and increased me next year. So we got to do something about that. But I'm not trying to steer us towards a fair tax act, but essentially that would be a universal fix for not being punished for painting.
No, absolutely. And, it's ironic that the government would use the term, perverse as far as talking about disincentivizing any kind of maintenance. I mean, I think out of the mouth speaks the heart. I mean, how much property does the government own that is dilapidated because of their whole deferred maintenance scheme? Right. I mean, we've got in this state, there's $8 billion in deferred maintenance across the state in the various entities and everything else. I mean, Fairbanks alone has got a third of $1 billion in deferred maintenance in their public facilities for their borough. So maybe out of the mouth speaks the heart. You know what I mean? I mean, they're like, there's their reverse incentive is to use their money for other things. So they're okay with it. Maybe that's part of the problem.
Government funded housing is not something I would hold up as a stalwart for what we should be striving for. In general, though, because you and I, when we talked about this article yesterday, and you brought it to my attention, one of the things you'd asked about is the risk. Like, this is like disincentivizing people from owning properties. Like, why would you even want to be a landlord with this kind of risk hanging out there? I think being a landlord, owning rental properties comes with risk for sure. Always has. And it always will, irrespective of this ordinance in Anchorage passing or not. There are risks to being in the property business for sure. But here's what I promise you. The rewards outweigh the risks, especially if you mitigate the risks to the best of your ability. In my book, The Millionaire Maker, the very opening sequence in the 6 steps is to decide. Once you've decided you are going to be in this business, then you've cut off all other possibilities. yeah, you've made a decision. Like, this is what you're going to do. You lean into it, and then you manage the risks. And at some point, you do have to reinvest in your property. That's just that's the fact. And guess what happens when you reinvest and you upgrade your properties? Well, necessarily you need to recapitalize that money. You need to have a return on it. Rents go up, but you're offering a nicer product. And that's what housing is. Housing is a product. And here's my second promise to you. Housing as a product, as a service, will be universally in demand always. It always has been throughout time and always will be, no matter what happens to the economy, no matter what happens to AI or what happens technologically, advancements that we're all, scared about, whatever. Housing in your local market will always be in demand. The stock market will rise and fall. The Fed can run amok and ruin businesses with rate hikes in the overnight lending or fail. Lehman Brothers can fail. Your housing in your own backyard will always be in demand, and small property ownership, like what I'm involved in. My friend in Anchorage is at a different level, at 100 different units plus many commercial businesses. There's all levels of this. I speak regularly to people that want to be in the business in a small to medium way, 1, 2 to 4 rental properties. So I promise you, the risk is there, the reward's greater, and it will always be in demand. Always.
What final thoughts here as we wrap up this segment? So what do you think? I mean, what was your friend's reaction? Are they going to fight back against this? Does this affect the landlord market where people, are looking to invest in properties? How do what do you give us your final thoughts on this here?
He's speaking out against it. However, he's also not worried about it. He sent me some pictures of his typical apartment, and they're clean, nice, and habitable, and he does a good job. It's a little bit like if there was some new law on the books about vehicle, maintenance or whatever, and you're driving a beautiful car that you maintain. It's like, oh, you're probably not worried about it. You don't want to see it pass, but it's not something that's keeping him up at night because he does such a nice job. I said back to him, though, I worry about the slippery slope and where they're going to move. Once they pass this, where are they going to move the needle next that might impact you? And so, yeah, he's going to definitely fight against it. But the reality is, anybody thinking about getting into the business of real estate, the ownership of real estate, their local laws are going to come and go. Landlords become engaged. Just like this guy in Anchorage, and just like, I do here, and a lot of my property owner friends here do, we become hyper aware of what's happening local and spend a lot of time thinking and worrying. That keeps me up at night more than what's happening maybe in Juneau or DC. What's happening local, that matters.
Well, and to your point of who defines what is habitable and what is not, or
Correct.
if Ryan just said, what if they rewrite the definition of inhabitable? That's always the danger there, and that's what worries me a little bit about some.
In addition to the Class B misdemeanor, criminalizing it, that's taking it to a whole other level. So I hope it does not pass.
Well, and we know that as goes Anchorage, in a lot of cases, so goes the rest of the state, and we definitely don't want to see this in our local communities or boroughs, et cetera, et cetera. All right, Chris Story, the man from Homer. We continue with him here in just a moment. We'll be back with more. When he comes back, he's going to switch his hats. He's going to put on his wizard hat, and he's going to be doing the guru thing here in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Back with more right after this.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes,
allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
All right, Chris Story is our guest. And Chris in the chat room just said something. I don't know. I don't think I necessarily agree with it. Chris, as a real estate guru, Chris in the chat room says most people can't afford to buy property nowadays with the costs over exceeds their income. And I don't know if he's talking about personal property or property to then rent out or investment grade property or what. But I mean, I think there's still it's still, like you said, it is the one thing that's going to be there come feast or famine. What do you say that there are properties out there that can be invested in, right?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I have another friend who's picking up a 60-unit apartment building, and I said to him, I said, "Well, talk to me about the lending, because I know he's not paying cash." And I said, "Talk to me about how you're handling the finance of this." And he said, right now, major opportunities exist for owner finance. So for seller carryback, basically let the current property owner becoming the bank for you. And he's seeing this major window. And he said, truthfully, he's seeing it across the country. He's watching everywhere. And he said across the country, it's opening up opportunities where maybe older property owners, they own their property free and clear. They just don't. And so you got to learn the market. And so with every adversity comes with it the seed of an equivalent or greater benefit, according to Napoleon Hill, if they can grow rich. I believe it. So when you see high prices and high interest rates, and guess what you're seeing concurrent with it? Sometimes lower demand. And with lower demand comes opportunity for you to get creative. But remember Dolph DeRousse's rule, 100-10-3-1. And I would remind Chris and anybody else that's listening right now to think about that. It may take looking at 100 properties or kissing 100 toads, we'll say, and then getting close to 10 of them such that you actually do some due diligence on 10 of them, make 3 offers, and end up with 1 property. And so if you go into it with that mindset that it's a puzzle to solve, it's a challenge, it's not easy ever. Even when interest rates were super low, guess what? Demand was through the roof. You might have been competing against 6 or 8 other people. Whereas right now, maybe you're competing against 1 other person or no other people at the table right now. So you have opportunities to be creative in any and every market. Truly, there is no bad time to be looking, but there's timing in your life. Maybe right now, if you're between jobs, maybe you took a financial hit for something else and it's not good timing for you. Fine. Continue to watch and learn the market. So when it is right timing in your life, you'll know where we're at in the marketplace and you can jump in with both feet and not be blindsided. But there's always opportunity, even right now. I just mentioned this on my show last week that Tiffany and I are looking right now. We've looked at 2 properties this last week. I'm not sure if we're going to make an offer on either or both, or we're going to wait. But we never stop looking. And that's the secret to understanding your market, is to constantly be looking.
The other Chris in the chat room, we've got a plethora of Chris's in the chat room. The other Chris,
them. They're geniuses.
I know, really. The other Chris in the chat room says, we need a good market downturn like 1989. Those were good times in real estate. I mean, I don't know if we need that. I mean, but there's advantages even in hardship. There's good things can come out of some of those hard times.
I had a friend investing in Las Vegas in 08 and 09, and he just cleaned up a few years later. I'm telling you, he was able to pick up things off below the bottom. So you think about the bottom of the barrel, he drilled a hole and found another bottom below it. And when the market came back, as it always does, he was able to reap a massive reward. Well, why didn't I? If I knew he was doing that and I knew this was an available thing, I knew that, Vegas is going to rebound, of course. It wasn't good timing in my life. Didn't have the means or opportunity, and we were facing some other struggles in our own life, in our own market. Like, okay, well, it's not good timing for me. But yeah, so the same thing to Chris Hayes' point there, that if you've got this downturn suddenly, but maybe you don't have the security or you don't have the savings, or you've just done some other commitment and your cash reserves are tied up. Right. What I do suggest for anybody, whether you're named Chris or not, is have an investment account and you're just building in it. Even if it's not good timing today, have that savings account for investments specifically. Not just a rainy day. Have a separate account just for investing. And when you do see either a downturn or a really good opportunity, you can grab it. But sometimes you have to make those opportunities. They don't just, the deal of the decade is made, not found.
Well, it's the confluence, right? You always got to be ready to take advantage of the confluence of events. And like you said, sometimes the timing, it's about timing. You could see it, you could taste it, it's going to be good, but you just can't pull it off at the time. So you got to be able to pre-plan, to plan ahead for those kind of timing incidents, to be able to take advantage of those kind of turns.
And in the Millionaire Maker, we also outlined who ought to be on your team. And one of those people is a hard money lender. And hard money lenders in difficult times can make it a breeze. So you could be hyper competitive, almost akin to a cash offer. You're ready to rock and roll, and that puts you in a more competitive advantage. Oh, but aren't the interest rates higher on those? Yeah, absolutely. But the opportunity cost of not having that relationship is far greater than some extra point you're going to pay.
All right, here we go. Let's do it.
The Michael Duke Show. Seriously humorous with a pinch of intellect. Sorry. That is humorous. Here's Michael Dukes.
All right, Chris Story just finished up. He's taken off his realtor hat. He's put on his soft robes, brought out his meditation bowl, and he's humming softly in the lotus position. Chris Story, the guru of positivity, comes in. Now it's time for our weekly life coaching lesson, and he's going to hang out with those robes. Look extremely comfortable, Chris. All right, let's talk about it. What is your topic for today, Mr. Story?
Being a backyard mentor, how to be influential where you are with what you've got.
Okay. All right. Backyard mentor, something you're used to. I've made no secret about the fact that Chris was instrumental in helping me put this whole deal together to get the radio stations and put all this, make all this happen. And he was my mentor on that. So he's got some track record on this deal. So, all right. Being a backyard mentor, Chris, hit me with it.
We're just talking about, a potential ordinance is going to pass in Anchorage, and there are people that are locally paying attention to that and will be speaking to it and having real influence, real world influence in their own backyard. If you were waiting to have influence, be it politically, legislatively, or with ordinances and things in your community, if you were waiting till you got to the floor of the House of Representatives in DC prior to Don Young's passing, may he rest in peace, you would have waited 50 years to have any influence. 50 years he occupied that seat, meaning if that's where you felt influence was going to come, if the power of influence was in the position or the title, you'd have had to wait 50 years, 40-something years for Senator Stevens, so on. Murkowski, she'll be there until she becomes governor. If you're waiting to get to DC to have influence, by the way, it's like threading the needle. There's only 1, 2, 3 people in our state that have influence. I don't think so. The real influence comes in your own backyard when you make and take advantage of the power of one, helping one person, one rung down from you on the ladder of life. That's all it takes. And then in turn, you ask of them to help one other person, and so on. And the power of one when it comes to influencing people where you are with what you've got. Right now, you're ahead on the ladder of life in 1, 2, or 10 arenas. I don't know, but ahead of me in something, ahead of Michael in something, ahead of your neighbor in something. And all it takes is you taking the time and recognizing the power of influence you've already got to influence that person's life potentially for generations to come.
Okay. I mean, I can see that. I mean, and again, one person helps one person who helps one person who helps one person. All of a sudden you've got paying it forward, as it were, in a plethora of things. And if that one person that you help actually helps 2 people, wow, now it's exponential.
How many people do you know that want to be an influencer? You know what I mean? They dream about wanting to be a viral influencer. Like if I could just get enough, and the algorithms are based on that desire, and our dopamine addiction is fed by, I don't know if you know this, but I read an article, and you probably do know this, but TikTok has built into their algorithm these one-hit wonders where you get a sudden, with one of your first videos that you post there, they will force feed it to a number of people to get you addicted to that 1,000 views, that 1,500 views. And suddenly the addiction of getting more and chasing that rabbit, chasing that high, that dopamine high is something that you can't let go of. And that's done on purpose. And if you know how the trick is done, then you can reverse engineer it and go, wait a minute, is that really influence? Is influence defined by the number of strangers that I could impact potentially, maybe, or sell a product to? Or is real influence where I'm at with what I've got and whom I can affect in my life today? Because something you do, something you say, if you go out of your way for one person, that didn't mean for that to rhyme, but it did, then you don't know what impact you're going to have going forward. And so don't wait. Nobody's coming to pick you. Nobody's going to come to your YouTube channel and discover you. You've got to go out into the world and discover what you can do where you are with what you've got. And that, most of the people probably you and I are talking to right now have no desire to be a YouTube influencer or famous, but I think we might underestimate, each of us, the power we've got in somebody's life to be a mentor right now. Because, well, you know, mentorship is something that you need a title. Somebody puts you in that position. No, you put yourself in the way of helping somebody else today, and you are a mentor. You can be a mentor right now, today, without anybody even telling you are. You just find somebody to help. You reach down the ladder of life, and there's always somebody one rung below you in something you're already doing that they want to do or get better at or improve upon.
What, I mean, but what are we mentoring people in? I mean, it could be anything, right? It doesn't have to be,
yeah,
I guess, radio or real estate or whatever, I'm interested in. It could be in anything.
That's right. Exactly. Having a positive force in somebody else's life and having real influence, and true influence is what I'm saying, is hyper local. I started thinking about this last week because I interviewed Jim Stovall. He's author of over 50 books. He founded and created, and still is the CEO of the Narrative Television Network for the Blind. He himself is blind, and he's his movies, 9 movies have been made with Louis Gossett Jr. and James Garner and Abigail Breslin and Brian Dennehy, famous people in his life for the last 30 years. And he just lost a coach recently. His Olympic weightlifting coach passed away. And in honoring him, he wrote a book about a small town coach who influenced people's lives. And when he passed, after 50 years of coaching, he passed, and people came from all over the country to remember the influence that he had on their life in his small town. And it just started me thinking, how many people don't recognize today the influence that they've had on other people's lives locally, right where they are, and the power of that. And we are we are independent, but interdependent at the same time. We as Americans are super independent. We as Alaskans are hyper independent. Like, we thrive on independence. We're not even connected to America. That's how independent we are. And yet at the same time, that dependency on each other, I think, can get missed a little in the fact that we're so independent, but we are dependent upon each other as a link to a chain. The chain's strength is dependent upon the strength of an individual link. So what can you do to help the link next to you? What can you do to reach down the ladder and to say, I got you. Here's how I did it. Come on up. I'll show you. You could do something different, better. It could be a coworker that's struggling with something. It could be somebody you see on the side of the street, or maybe it's mentorship you offer through your church or through the food pantry or some other volunteer organization, or just a stranger you meet, like Charles Huff, who handed me, a total stranger, a book in 1992 and said, read this and it'll be equivalent to a college degree. And he knew I didn't even have a high school diploma, and he knew what it meant to me, and I felt diminished in that. And he handed me a reputation in a book that altered my life. And he didn't know that. He didn't know the impact it would have, but he was a mentor to me. And we had a handful of conversations in the course of 3 days.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because this reminds me of the old axiom of iron sharpens iron, that sometimes the teacher learns as much as the student, kind of thing. So as you mentor other people, you're also sharpening your own skills in whatever area you happen to be mentoring, right?
Yes, absolutely. And there's nothing teaches like teaching. Like, oh yeah, you got to really stop and think about, how would I do this? How did I do what I've accomplished? How did I get here? And when you start teaching it to somebody, be it a younger family member or a stranger, you begin to really think about process and how you got there. And then you can teach it step by step. Or again, it could be as simple as just helping somebody do something that they otherwise couldn't or didn't think they could do on their own. And so again, it's the power of one, helping one person one rung down from you on the ladder of life.
All right. Well, 60 seconds here. Final thoughts on being a mentor, Chris.
You already, I mean, Michael, that's what you do right here every single day on the radio, but you needn't have a microphone to do it. Just remember, it could be a neighbor, it could be a stranger, or somebody you love. Make a difference in one life today, and you'll make a difference in the whole world. There's a ripple effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sowing and reaping. It's the payback. It's the pay it forward. There's so many different things. They all kind of wrap back around to this. Being a mentor is important. And one of the mentors in my life is Chris Story, who you can find at ilovehomeralaska.com. Chris, thank you, my friend, for coming in and sharing with us every week. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, folks, we got more coming up tomorrow. The Michael Duke Show. Be kind, love one another, live well. All right, final bite at the apple for Chris. Anything you missed, Chris, or anything else you want to hit on before we let you go?
No, I appreciate that, Michael. I appreciate it a lot. And I think that, I keep coming back to the Charles Huff because, I've written now 3 books about that one relationship. I mean, he's, Oscar in this Millionaire series is an amalgamation of several people in my life, to include my dad. But at the same time, Charles he threw a tiny pebble into a pond, and those ripples are still being felt 33 years later. And so to me, that just inspires me. That inspires me to, take a deep breath when I get really frustrated at what's happening, at a governmental level, and go, wait a minute, hold on. Am I going to make a bigger difference by being angry, or am I going to make a bigger difference by just making a phone call and talking to one person and trying to exercise influence locally? And that's, I think it would make a huge difference.
Well, it's interesting that, you and I in our conversations, I've discovered that, Charles Huff, again, you only knew him for a handful of days, and he didn't know what you did later on with your life, which is different than the books, obviously. But it's amazing that he had no idea the ripple that he created in little old Homer, Alaska, by handing out a book to a young guy who later on became, a mogul of real estate in the same community kind of thing. That's the kind of shocking thing, that the littlest thing like that, spending a couple, 3 days, meeting him 2 or 3 times, getting a book. It's shocking what can be done with just the littlest effort at that point.
And, it's like Jim Rohn, his mentor was Earl Schoaf, and Earl Schoaf taught him that if you're ever thinking about a tip and 2 numbers come to mind, always go with the bigger number. And you're thinking, should I tip them 20 or 25%? He said, instantly go, 25, go to the bigger number. And what he was saying was, you don't know what that little difference will make in that person's life and the ripple effect it will have going forward. But I just think about that. Like, for example, The Schoolyard Millionaire, my new book, The Wheel of Life and Wealth. I tell people, only get this book for the children you care about.
Wait, that's marketing. That's marketing.
That's my marketing pitch. I just wish the state would pay for it for me. If I could get the state to pay for my marketing,
I wish it would happen.
I could go somewhere.
All right. Well, thank you, my friend.
Thanks, Michael.
I appreciate you coming on board. As always, it's great to talk with you. We'll catch you next week, okay?
All right. Sounds good. Bye-bye.
Folks, we're out of time. We got to go. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We will see you tomorrow. Have a great day.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.